Coming up on Mountain News this morning, survivors and first responders reflect on the worst tornado outbreak in eastern Kentucky history. And one of our former anchor and reporters talks about her experience during that fateful day.
Dedicated to eastern and southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News this morning.
Good morning. It's just before 6 o'clock on this Thursday morning. I'm Dakota Makris, and I had a few hours to sleep in yesterday, and I just can't wake up. Let's head over to Brandon. I don't know about you, Brandon, how you're feeling this morning.
We're paying for it today.
I think my body's just so used to waking up early that when I sleep in, it's the worst I get. I don't know.
So our director, Dustin, and I, he worked the ball games last night down in Corbin, and he talked about what time he got back. I said, hey, we got about the same amount of sleep because he got back a little later than we did, but still, it just, when you get up at a certain time, it's just, So I'll be taking a much-needed nap today after work. All right, let's get into the forecast this morning. And we're seeing some nice conditions as you head out the door over toward Pikeville there, US 119, US 23. All quiet there near Pikeville Commons this morning. Temperatures very mild for early March, but still not too bad. It's actually warmer than our daytime highs, our average daytime highs right now anyway, which is 53. 54 London, Williamsburg, 60 in Middlesboro, 61 in Jacksboro, but a few 40s out there like Irvin, Somerset, Moorhead, and Harlan, all at 48 across our region. Paducah's also at 48. 50 in Louisville, 42 the Tri-Cities and Cincinnati, and 54 in Nashville, Tennessee this morning. 60 our forecast high. Our average high is 53. The record high, 80, set back on this day in 1992. Dakota?
All right, Brendan, thank you. Wednesday marked the 10-year anniversary of the devastating day here in the Commonwealth when many parts of eastern Kentucky were heavily damaged after tornadoes tore through the region. Places like downtown West Liberty looked very different, than it does now. Buildings were torn apart, cars were thrown around, and people were walking around searching for family. We talked with the Morgan County paramedic who answered the call that night. March 2nd, 2012 started as a normal shift for paramedic Brian Plank.
They started reporting tornadoes coming through, so we went out in the parking lot to watch because they got to be pretty captivating as we were standing out there and watching it come over basically where the hospital would be.
The EF3 tornado was moving towards West Liberty between 50 to 60 miles per hour, destroying everything in its path.
We went down to the end of 172 and sat there at the intersection until we could see which way the tornado was going to go, and we were going to head the other direction and get out of its path and then come back in.
They made their way back into town, eventually leaving their trucks because roads were blocked.
As we were walking down, people were just starting to come out of their homes, their houses, or what was left of them. There were several trailer parks and things that were in town that were in total disarray, and people were basically just coming back out of the rubble.
An old building was used to house people who were injured or left without a home. They found one man who suffered multiple injuries.
And it was more than we could treat. Basically, we could wrap him up, we could control bleeding, we could do some of that stuff, but there wasn't any physical way of getting him out.
He helped as many as he could, including a couple whose house was blown away.
And I said, where were you all at through this? And the lady looked at me and she was like, we were right here. I said, like where at though here? Because at that point with me, it wasn't sinking in. And she said, we were right here. He can't walk. And I didn't have time to get him up and help get him moved.
10 years later, that day is very much fresh on his mind.
It was a fulfilling experience. For me, I was glad to have the opportunity. I would not want to have the opportunity again, nor would I want anybody else to ever have to go through that.
And once people were cared for, he and his crew headed out to check out other parts of the county, and the recovery was already underway.
The neighbors, the people there, were already coming together and clearing roadways and doing things. And I liked seeing that, and I think it's a good sign of eastern Kentucky, as neighbors helping neighbors. They wasn't waiting on somebody to come and dig them out.
Well, Brian told us they took 100 people to a hospital in just 30 minutes that night. Well, we talked with a tornado survivor in West Liberty about the impact those storms had on her. Doris Shuck was home alone when the storm hit. She says it lasted about 3 minutes. Now, thankfully, she was able to escape from the debris unharmed. She was later reunited with her family, but says that day is still haunting.
It was so sad and hard for me to say, we no longer live at 644 Liberty Road. I need to do a change of address. that was very hard. I can remember being tearful several times when I had to do that.
After the tornado passed through, Doris posted on Facebook, quote, "I am alive. Lindsay and Richard are with me. Austin, call me. My house is gone," end quote. The tornado that hit West Liberty had peak winds of 140 miles per hour. Well, several people died when a tornado hit Laurel County on that night. In East Bernstadt, the crisis management was handled by Albert Hell, the Laurel County Emergency Management Director at that time. He says he was driving towards London when the tornado touched down nearby. He rallied local fire departments and emergency personnel to respond as soon as the coast was clear.
There'd only been one person killed in Laurel County due to a tornado up to this point.
5 people in East Bernstadt area would die that night, with one person dying from their injuries some days later. Nearly 400 homes were destroyed. While in Johnson County, it was also hit hard that night. Officials say nearly 400 homes were either damaged or destroyed there, and dozens were injured. 2 teens also died that night. One Johnson County official said nobody expected something like this in the mountains of eastern Kentucky.
It came as a surprise, but in another way, I was, and I think a lot of people was kind of expecting something, but I guess we really didn't anticipate it was going to be as severe as it was.
Now the areas that were damaged have recovered, but officials say some families are still dealing with what happened financially and emotionally. People in Salyersville say they remember that day like it was yesterday, and even 10 years removed, the tornado is still a thought every time the wind picks up. Our buddy Forbes shares their stories.
In the hills of eastern Kentucky, we don't think that tornadoes were ever going to be here because there'd never been any.
In Salyersville, it's like a giant chainsaw sheared off the tops of trees before tearing into homes.
Jim Caldwell at the time was on the television, and he said, if you're in Salyersville, take cover now.
I've been able to see, it's unbelievable, just total devastation.
Debris everywhere. I mean, it looked like a war zone. We seen the sky, and you could see the tornado as it was going on up.
March 2nd, 2012. A day forever spinning through the minds of those who never saw it coming.
It was hot, and it shouldn't have been, and it was stuffy, but I never dreamed of a tornado in eastern Kentucky.
About from the top of the hill to the top of the hill, coming this way.
We heard something like a jet airplane, and it come, and it was just split second. It was awful.
Bringing the Salyersville community to its knees.
That we see every day. We were all praying, just crying. The kids were crying, and I mean, it was you can't really explain what's going through your mind at that time. I mean, everything's running through your mind. Am I going to make it out of here alive? Is my family going to be okay? Is my house going to be okay?
But through the destruction, the community avoided death.
Material things can be replaced, but your life can't. And we were just lucky that we didn't get killed that day.
Still, many believe it will never be a closed chapter, and the images will never fade, because it just takes the wind to stir it back up.
It scares me to death, because a few days ago we had weather about like that, about like what it was the day before the tornado.
But they say the fear is no match for the strength they found.
But after 10 years, I mean, I'm still cautious of the weather, but I don't let it control me like it did the first couple years after the tornado.
By coming together,
I think it's come back even better than it was before.
And building back the place they call home.
Really blessed to get back our lives, our livelihood, our normalcy.
In Salyersville, Buddy Forbes, WYMT Mountain News.
Well, those we heard from say getting through that storm is something they were only able to by coming together as a community, saying the growth the area has seen since then is an indicator of the strength they share. Well, it's incredible what the men and women in emergency services all across our region did that day to help people. Well, we also talked with 3 of our former reporters who covered the storms that day. We sent former WYMT anchor and reporter Katie Roach Dietrich to hard-hit West Liberty that night. One issue she and our team ran into was the road leading into West Liberty was blocked by police. She also says communication was gone. She tells us that day broke a myth of how people felt about eastern Kentucky weather.
Even to this day, that was the one thing that everybody kept saying in the days after, is like, nobody thought that this could happen. Nobody thought that tornadoes, especially ones that were that devastating, could happen in the mountains of eastern Kentucky.
Well, you can see more of Katie's interview in our upcoming special that airs Monday, March 14th at 7 o'clock p.m. right here on WYMT.
6:09, some hard stories to tell yesterday, but we hope that we did those folks justice there across our region. 10 years, hard to believe it's been that long. Let's get into the forecast, current forecast for right now. I-75 at Mount Vernon, not too bad down that way. The sun trying to come up, but a few clouds in its way there as we head toward about 6:10 this morning, and very mild. 48, Moorhead, Irvin, actually up to 52 in Irvin now. Moorhead is 48 along with Somerset, and that's it. Everybody else is climbing this morning. 50s and 60s out there across the region. We've got 47 in Ashland too, kind of in the corner of our region. I still think we get up to about 60 this afternoon as clouds gradually start to increase as we head deeper into the daytime hours. And as we look ahead at our headlines, a weak disturbance will bring those clouds in. The mild trend will continue. We'll still be a 60 or above for the next couple of days, but a late weekend front heading into early next week will bring us some increased rain chances by the end of it. Dakota?
All right, Brandon, thank you so much. At 6:10, when we come back here on Mountain News this morning, new satellite images show the true impact of war as the Russian invasion of Ukraine sees yet another day.